It was almost midnight when I heard the front door slam. At first, I thought it was just the wind. Old building, warped frame, same as always. But then I heard the footsteps. Fast. Heavy. The kind of steps someone makes when they're not walking to get somewhere, but trying to get away. I got up from my desk and poked my head out of my room. The living room was mostly dark, lit only by the dim glow of the hallway light and a soft flicker of the paused TV screen. Eli stood in the middle of the room, both hands on his head, staring down at the floor like it had personally betrayed him. "Hey," I said gently, "you good?" He didn't answer right away, just kept breathing in that clipped, uneven way people do when they're trying not to lose it. I didn't push. I knew that silence. I'd lived in it before. After a few seconds, he dropped his hands to his sides and finally looked up. "She's gone," he said, voice flat. "Maya?" He nodded once. "She left." Like, actually left. Took her stuff. Said it's done. I stepped out farther into the room, unsure if I should go to him or just stay put. I'd only been living here 2 months. We weren't exactly strangers, but we weren't heart-to-hearts on the couch close either. Still, something about the way he was standing there made me move a little closer. "Shit," I said. "I'm sorry, man." He shook his head like he didn't want pity. But his face, it was all tension, lips pressed tight, eyes glossy but dry. He looked like someone who'd been holding his breath for days and had just now realized it. She said she couldn't do it anymore, that she felt alone, that I stopped showing up, he said, dropping onto the couch like the weight of the night finally hit his chest. "I thought we were just going through a rough patch, you know." I sat down in the armchair across from him. "Did you see it coming?" "Kind of," he admitted. "But I didn't think it would be tonight. I thought maybe we'd talk more, fight more, fix it. Not this." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped like he was praying. Silence settled again, but not a heavy one. It was that kind of tired quiet you only reach when someone's not trying to fix the moment, just sitting it with you. "You don't have to talk if you don't want," I said after a while. "But I'm here." He didn't look at me, but I saw his fingers twitch slightly like he heard something in that. A long minute passed. "Thanks," he muttered. I nodded. "You want a drink?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "If you're having one." We weren't friends in the way where I knew what he drank, but I guessed right. Whiskey, no ice. I brought back 2 glasses and sat next to him, just far enough to not crowd him, just close enough that he wouldn't feel alone. We sipped in silence, the kind that felt earned, not awkward. He didn't cry, he didn't rant, he just sat, but his shoulders dropped a little more after each sip, his breathing started to steady, and somewhere between the second and third round, he leaned back against the couch and let out a sigh that sounded like the first real breath of the night. "You ever get blindsided by someone like that?" he asked, voice lower now. "Yeah," I said. "Not a girlfriend, but yeah." He didn't ask more, didn't need to. The air between us was already softening, like the shape of something fragile we both knew not to touch too fast. I watched his hand rest on the couch cushion between us, fingers slightly curled like he didn't know what to do with them. He wasn't looking at me, but I could tell he was waiting. Not for anything specific. Just not to be alone. I didn't move, I didn't touch him, but I stayed. That was the first real thing I did for him. I didn't expect him to fall asleep on the couch. But maybe I should have. The way his body slumped just a little after his third whiskey. The way his voice started drifting off mid-sentence. Softer. Slower. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a long day. The kind that comes from holding it together for too long. He hadn't even finished his last drink. Just set the glass on the floor with this quiet kind of finality like that was all he could give for the night. I thought about waking him. About nudging him gently, telling him to go to his room, get some actual sleep. But something in his expression, the subtle way his face had finally relaxed, his chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, made me stop. Instead, I pulled the throw blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over him, careful not to make a big deal of it. I didn't go back to my room either. I sat back in the armchair across from him, phone dim in my hand, thumb mindlessly scrolling while my mind went nowhere. The apartment was still, just the ticking of the wall clock and the occasional sound of a car passing outside. I kept telling myself I should go to bed, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there and stayed. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of shuffling. My neck ached from the awkward way I'd slept in the chair, and my back cracked as I stretched. Eli was sitting up, blanket pooled around his waist, hair a mess, eyes puffy, in that quiet way you only get after holding in tears that never came. He looked surprised to see me still there. "You didn't go to bed?" he asked, voice scratchy. I rubbed my eyes. "Didn't want to leave you here alone." That made him pause. Just a beat, like the words had registered, but he didn't know what to do with them. "You didn't have to do that. Didn't feel right not to." He nodded, almost to himself, then looked down at his hands. "Thanks," he said softly. We didn't talk about it much more that morning. Just moved around each other in the kitchen, making coffee and eggs, not really hungry, but needing something to do. I tried not to hover, but I didn't leave the room either. He kept glancing at his phone. I could tell he was waiting for a text that wasn't going to come. That kind of waiting you try to pretend you're not doing, even though every few minutes your hand inches toward your screen again. By the time he finally flipped it over and pushed it aside, something shifted in the air. "She's not going to text," he said, staring into his coffee like it owed him an answer. "Not today. Probably not ever." I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "That sucks, man." He nodded. "Yeah." We stood there for a bit in silence. The kind that doesn't ask for anything. Then he said, "You ever have someone leave like that? Just done? All at once?" "Sort of," I said. "It was a guy, though." His head turned slightly toward me. "Oh." I gave a half smile. "Yeah. Not a secret or anything, just hadn't come up." He looked at me for a second longer than necessary, then nodded like something had just clicked into place. "That makes sense." "Yeah? You're just, I don't know. You get it. You listen different." That surprised me more than it should have. But I didn't say anything. I just let him say it. After that, the day sort of drifted. He didn't go into work, and I didn't either. Not that I had anything pressing. Freelancing gives you the kind of flexibility that can make you lonely if you're not careful. I thought Eli might want space, but he didn't disappear into his room like I expected. He stuck around, moved to the couch, turned on the TV, but didn't really watch. At one point, I offered to go grab takeout, and he just said, "Only if you eat with me." So I did. We sat on the couch with cheap pad thai and a movie neither of us were paying attention to. Every now and then he'd make a joke, and I could tell he was trying. Not for me, but for himself, trying not to feel like everything was falling apart. At some point, he leaned back, legs stretched out, arms crossed loosely over his chest, and let out this long breath that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than his lungs. "I don't know who I am without her," he said, not dramatically, just like a fact. "Maybe that's the part that's next," I said, figuring that out. He glanced at me, something unreadable in his face. "That's a scary thought." "Doesn't have to be." "Yeah? You've had to figure yourself out from scratch?" "Still doing it." That got the smallest smile from him. "Well, if you end up with answers, let me know." We didn't talk much after that, but we didn't need to. The weird part was it didn't feel heavy. It felt okay, like maybe silence wasn't empty, just quiet. When the movie ended and the screen went dark, he didn't move right away. Instead, he turned to me, not facing me directly, just looking sideways like it was easier that way. "I'm glad you stayed," he said. "I didn't really think about it," I replied. "Just did." His gaze lingered on me for a second longer than it should have. Not intense, just honest. "Still," he said, "I noticed." And then he did something unexpected. He shifted just a little closer, like it was nothing, like we were just two people leaning into the same cushion for the first time. His arm didn't touch mine, but it hovered, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. He didn't say anything else, but he didn't move away. Neither did I. The shift between us was subtle. If you asked me what changed that day, I wouldn't be able to point to one thing. There was no dramatic conversation, no cinematic moment, just a closeness that didn't go away after that night. A space between us that stayed warm, stayed open, like something unspoken had finally been acknowledged. And now we were both leaning into it, one quiet hour at a time. It started with the little things. He stopped going to bed early. Or maybe he just waited until I did. We'd end up sitting side by side on the couch past midnight, not really watching anything, just letting the noise of a half-watched show fill the gaps. He'd lean back. I'd stretch out. Our shoulders started brushing, not always on purpose, but not really by accident either. And then there were the mornings. I'd find him in the kitchen already making coffee, 2 mugs instead of 1. No words, just the clink of ceramic and the smell of something warm. He never asked how I liked it. He just remembered. And I never asked if he was okay. I just showed up. I started keeping a hoodie in the living room, not because I needed it, but because I wasn't going back to my room as often. We became comfortable. Too comfortable, maybe, for 2 guys who were supposed to just be roommates. One night, maybe a week after she left, we were on the balcony. It had rained earlier, and the air smelled like wet concrete and leaves. He handed me a beer without looking, like he always did, and we leaned on the railing, shoulder to shoulder. "I keep thinking she's going to walk through the door," he said quietly. I nodded. "Muscle memory, yeah. I keep expecting her perfume, her keys in the bowl, her voice in the hallway, and then it's just—" He glanced around. "Quiet. You hate the quiet?" "I used to. But now—" He didn't finish the thought. He didn't have to. His arm was barely brushing mine, but it stayed there. Steady. Like he was holding onto the contact without making it obvious. "Now it's not so bad," I said, finishing it for him. He glanced at me. And I saw it. Not longing. Not sadness. Something closer to curiosity. The way you look at a door you've never opened before, just trying to decide if it's worth stepping through. It was the night he fell asleep on my shoulder that made me stop pretending we were just roommates. We were watching some dumb crime documentary. He'd had a beer, maybe 2, and I could feel the way he was drifting, his body heavier against mine, his head lowering, breath slowing. I thought he'd pull away, or excuse himself, or do that thing where guys shift and pretend they weren't leaning in to begin with. But he didn't. He let himself stay. His head rested on my shoulder like it had been there 100 times before, and I froze, not because I didn't want it, but because I did, too much. And it scared me how natural it felt, his weight, his warmth, the way his thigh pressed into mine just enough to remind me this wasn't a dream. I sat there, heart racing, barely breathing, trying not to move, and then he whispered, almost sleepily, "You're easy to be around." I swallowed. "Yeah? Yeah," he said. "Feels better when you're here." He didn't say anything else after that. He just kept breathing slow and deep, still pressed into me. I didn't move for what felt like an hour. I didn't want to break the moment. Even when my arm went numb, I stayed. I let it happen. Eventually, I shifted just enough to lay a pillow behind his head so he wouldn't wake with a cramp. He stirred a little, mumbled something incoherent, then settled again. This time, his hand landed on my knee. Light. Barely there. But it stayed. The next morning was strange. Not in a bad way, just charged. He didn't mention falling asleep on me, and I didn't bring it up either. But something about the way we moved around each other had changed. The space between us had shrunk. Not physically, but emotionally. He lingered longer when we talked, made more eye contact. Stood just a little closer when he passed behind me in the kitchen. It wasn't flirtation. Not exactly. It was intimacy. Quiet, unspoken. Like we'd become something without saying it. That afternoon, I was working on a project at the dining table. Eli sat on the couch behind me, flipping through channels. At some point, he got up, walked over, and stood behind my chair. Close. I felt his hand on my shoulder. "Need a break?" he asked. His voice was light, but the touch wasn't casual. I looked up at him. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, just didn't want to be over there." He didn't move his hand. I didn't move either. And for a second, the air between us went still. Not like time stopped, but like it paused long enough to see what we'd do with it. And neither of us moved away. A few days later, it rained hard. The kind of rain that makes the whole world feel muffled. like everything outside the apartment had been turned down a few notches. It was a Saturday, gray and still, and Eli hadn't left his room all morning. I figured he needed space. Maybe the weight of everything was catching up to him again. I made a second pot of coffee anyway. By noon, I was halfway through an email when I heard his door open. Barefoot steps across the wood floor. No socks. No rush. I didn't look up until he sat across from me at the table, wearing a hoodie with the sleeves pushed up and hair still messy from sleep. He looked at me for a beat. You ever feel like you're just floating through the days? Lately, yeah. I don't know what to do with myself, he said. It's like all my routines were built around her. I nodded. Now you're figuring out how to build new ones. He leaned back, ran a hand through his hair. I don't want to build them alone. It wasn't romantic when he said it. It wasn't even loaded. But it hit me hard, because I knew exactly what he meant. He didn't need a grand gesture or a declaration. He needed presence. He needed someone to sit across from him and make the room feel less empty. I'm here, I said. His gaze flicked up to meet mine. I know. And then he smiled. Just a little. The first real one since she'd left. That evening, I made dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and garlic bread, and the closest thing to a salad we could cobble together with what we had in the fridge. Eli offered to help, but I told him to chill, and for once, he actually did. He sat at the counter while I moved around the kitchen, asking about my client work, nodding along while I ranted about slow feedback and design revisions. He wasn't really invested in the details, but that wasn't the point. He was listening. Halfway through chopping onions, I felt his eyes on me. You always do this? He asked. Cook? Yeah. Not always, I said. Just felt right tonight. He paused. It's nice, you taking care of things. I glanced over my shoulder. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes were softer than usual. Felt like the right time to do something warm, I said. He didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. Later, we ate on the couch with the plates in our laps, a blanket thrown over both our legs like it had just ended up there. He sat closer than usual. Not quite touching, but closer. The show we put on played in the background, but neither of us really watched it. After dinner, we let the plates sit on the coffee table. I could tell he was thinking about something, that same quiet pull behind his eyes that had become familiar. And then, very softly, he said, You ever think about what it would have been like if things were different? Different how? Like if you met someone earlier. Before the mess. Before the heartbreak. I didn't say anything right away. Yeah, I said eventually. Sometimes. He nodded, his gaze on the TV, but clearly not watching. I feel like maybe I wasn't with the right person. I kept trying to make it work, but it never really clicked. It was always kind of a performance. I waited. But with you, it's different, he said, turning slightly toward me. It's just easy. I felt my heart press hard against my ribs. I couldn't tell if he realized what he'd just said, or if he was still figuring it out himself. I feel the same, I said, voice low. He looked at me, really looked, and this time he didn't look away. I don't want to mess this up, he said. You're not, I replied. We're just figuring it out. His hand was on the blanket between us. Not touching mine, but close. I don't know what this is, he admitted. It doesn't have to be anything yet, I said. We're just here. He nodded. Then after a second, he said, Can I? He didn't finish the sentence, but I knew. I turned my hand, palm up, just slightly. The quietest kind of yes, and he took it. Not dramatically, not hungrily. Just fingers slipping between mine, tentative at first, then sure. Like he'd been holding something back for days and finally let himself stop. We didn't look at each other. Not for a while, we just sat there. Our hands tangled together beneath the blanket, the sound of rain still tapping softly against the windows. No words, no questions. Just presence. And it was enough. After that night, things didn't explode into something new. They shifted, almost imperceptibly, like the angle of sunlight changing at the end of a season. The world still looked the same, but everything felt just a little warmer. We didn't talk about the hand-holding the next morning, but it didn't go away either. If anything, it started happening more. Slowly, quietly, like neither of us needed to define it, because feeling it was enough. I was making coffee when he walked up behind me, barefoot and rumpled, and casually let his fingers brush mine when he reached for the mug I'd already set out for him. Our pinkies touched. He didn't move away. Neither did I. Later that day, we were watching something dumb on the couch. Some dating show he pretended to hate but definitely had opinions about. And without thinking, he leaned against me, head tilted, shoulder snug under mine. I shifted just slightly, made room, and let him settle. The contact wasn't accidental. It wasn't bold either. It was just familiar. Easy, like we'd done this 100 times before. One night, almost 2 weeks after she'd left, he came into my room. I wasn't asleep. I'd just turned off the lamp and was laying there in the dark, half scrolling my phone, half letting my thoughts drift. There was a quiet knock. Then his voice, low and unsure. "You up?" "Yeah." The door creaked open and he stepped in slowly, like he wasn't sure he should be doing it. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "You okay?" He nodded, just didn't want to be alone. I sat up and slid over, pulling back the blanket a little without saying anything. He didn't hesitate. He climbed in, moving slow like he was still asking for permission without words. The bed wasn't huge, and his body was warm beside me. Tension sat between us for a second, like we were both waiting for a cue that didn't come. "You good?" I asked. He let out a long breath. "Yeah, now." The room was quiet except for the hum of the city outside and the soft creak of the mattress as we both adjusted slightly. "We didn't touch. Not at first. But a few minutes later, I felt it. The brush of his arm against mine, the subtle weight of his leg resting closer than necessary. And then, slowly, he reached over and found my hand under the blanket again. Our fingers laced like they'd done it before. No words, just breath and stillness, and a connection that needed no explanation. The next morning was different. Not awkward. Not tense. Just a little quieter. Like something had settled in both of us, and we didn't quite know what to do with it yet. We made breakfast together, bumping elbows, trading sleepy glances and quiet smiles. At one point, I caught him watching me while I flipped pancakes. Not in that obvious way, but in a quiet, studying kind of way, like he was cataloging something. Like he was trying to hold on to the shape of this feeling before it disappeared. "You look good like that," he said softly. "Like what?" "Just like this, in the kitchen." "Comfortable," I raised an eyebrow. "You flirting with me?" His smile was crooked, unbothered. "Maybe." I tried to play it cool, but my chest was warm, and I knew he could see it in the way I turned back to the stove too fast. Later, while we ate at the counter, he reached over and wiped a bit of syrup from my lip with his thumb. It was the gentlest touch. A small moment, but it lit something in me I didn't expect. "Thanks," I said, clearing my throat. He just nodded, smile still playing at the corner of his mouth. That afternoon, he went for a run, something he hadn't done in weeks, and I stayed behind, catching up on work. But I found myself distracted, staring at the open spot on the couch where he usually sat, half waiting to hear the door again. When he finally came back, sweaty and flushed, he tossed me a bottle of water before grabbing one for himself. He peeled off his hoodie, then his shirt, and tossed them both in the laundry basket by the door. I tried not to stare. I failed. He caught me looking. "Something on your mind?" he asked, grinning. I shrugged. "Just thinking." "About?" "You." The grin faded, but his eyes stayed soft. He crossed the room, stopping just short of me, close enough to feel, not touching. "Yeah? Yeah?" He waited. I waited. There was a breath. The kind of pause that always comes before a choice. Then, slowly, I reached up and touched his side. Just my fingers brushing lightly against his skin. He didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, he stepped in closer, close enough that our legs touched. His hand came up, hesitated for a second, then gently cupped the back of my neck. We stayed like that for a moment. Skin warm, breath shallow, the world narrowed to nothing but distance and tension and whatever we'd been building this whole time. Then he kissed me. Not hungrily, not desperately, just quietly. Soft lips, slow movement. A kiss that asked a question more than it made a statement. I kissed him back. And just like that, the weight we'd been carrying between us dissolved. He pulled back just an inch, forehead against mine. "This okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah." He smiled. "Good." Then he kissed me again. Slower this time. Deeper. And I let myself fall into it. We didn't rush it. That night, after that kiss, he didn't ask to stay in my bed. He didn't need to. He already knew I would have said yes. But he just touched my arm, smiled like he was still surprised by his own courage, and said, "I should probably shower." I nodded, not pressing for more. "Go for it." "Want to join me?" he added after a second, then laughed. "Kidding." But the look in his eyes said maybe not entirely. I just raised an eyebrow and said, "Let's not complicate a good moment." His smile lingered even as he walked away. Fair. The next few days were gentle. That's the only way I can describe it. Gentle. It wasn't like we turned into some couple overnight. There were no labels, no conversations about what it all meant. We didn't wake up with our arms around each other or suddenly start saying sweet things over breakfast. But there were touches. Little ones. He'd rest his hand on my thigh while we sat on the couch. I'd run my fingers along the back of his neck when I passed by him at the sink. When we watched TV, he'd shift so his leg pressed against mine and didn't move. It was subtle, quiet, but it filled every inch of space between us. The apartment, once a place where two guys coexisted, started feeling like something else. Like a home we were building together. One shared breath at a time. One night we were both working late. Him on some stuff for his job, me editing a client project. We were sitting across from each other at the dining table, laptops open, music playing low in the background. He looked up and caught me watching him. "What?" he asked, soft and amused. "Nothing," I said. "Just you look good when you're focused." He rolled his eyes, but I saw the smile he tried to suppress. "I mean it," I added. "I haven't slept properly in 2 weeks. I look like hell." "You don't," I said. "You look like you're coming back to life." That shut him up for a second. His gaze softened. "I think you're right," he said. "And I think it's because of you." My throat tightened a little at that, but I didn't say anything. I just reached across the table and let my fingers find his. He gave them a light squeeze. We didn't sleep together that night. Not in the way most people think of that phrase, but he did fall asleep on the couch with his head in my lap, and I sat there for over an hour, stroking his hair gently, letting the rise and fall of his breathing calm something deep inside me. And when I finally shook him awake and told him it was time for bed, he didn't even open his eyes. Just mumbled, "You coming too?" So I did. We laid in bed, fully clothed under the same blanket. He curled toward me, not clutching, not needy, just seeking out warmth the way a tired body does. I turned toward him, rested my palm on his chest, and felt the slow, steady beat of his heart beneath it. He placed his hand over mine. "Thanks for not giving up on me," he whispered. "I wasn't going to," I said. "Even when you weren't sure what you wanted, I was sure I'd stay." His thumb rubbed slow circles into the back of my hand. He didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The next morning, he kissed me before getting out of bed. It was casual, like it had always been part of our routine. Just a brush of lips, a touch to my jaw, a whispered, "I'll make the coffee." And it wrecked me in the softest way. Because there was no hesitation now. No doubt. Just him. Just me. And the slow rhythm we were finding in each other. Later that week, he was sitting on the floor, back against the couch, scrolling his phone while I worked at the table. He looked up and said, "You know what's weird?" "What?" "This is the first time in a long time I haven't felt like I'm failing at something." I set my laptop aside. "You're not." "I know," he said, "but I used to feel that way constantly, like I was never enough for her, or for the life we were trying to build." He paused. "But with you, it's not about being enough. It's just about being here." That stayed with me, even long after he turned back to his phone, and the moment passed like a ripple across still water. The first time he kissed me without any kind of buildup. No long stare, no soft music in the background, no flickering tension. We were both in sweatpants, eating cold leftovers at the kitchen counter. I made a stupid joke about how terrible the pasta tasted the second time around, and he laughed, leaned in, and just kissed me. Brief, light, like it belonged there. And maybe it did. When he pulled back, he just said, "You're my favorite part of the day." I couldn't say anything for a second. Then, same. By the third week, it was no longer something new. It was still soft, still careful, but it had become part of the air between us. That constant thread of closeness, of trust, of something slowly being rewired inside both of us. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't about proving anything. It was about the way we moved around each other like we belonged in each other's space now. Like the silence between our footsteps had learned a new language. One night I came home late after meeting a client. Nothing dramatic, just a long coffee and some revisions. When I stepped into the apartment, it was quiet. The lights were low. But he was there. Sitting on the floor with his back against the couch, hoodie sleeves pushed up, hair slightly messy. His eyes met mine, and something about the way he looked at me made my chest tighten. "You okay?" I asked, setting my bag down. He nodded, but he didn't smile. "Just thinking," he said. "Want company?" He didn't say yes. He just reached a hand toward me. I walked over, sat down beside him, and let his fingers thread through mine. After a few minutes, he spoke. "I keep wondering if she ever saw me. Like, the real me. Not the one she wanted." I didn't speak. "Not yet. And the more I think about it, the more I realize I don't think I even knew who the real me was back then." "You do now?" He looked over at me. "I think I'm starting to." I gave his hand a light squeeze. "That's what matters." He leaned his head back against the couch. "It's just weird. I used to think love had to be loud, intense. Fights and passion and these big sweeping moments. But this, what we have, it's not like that." "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, it's better." He turned toward me, his face close now, voice low. "I feel safe with you." That was it. Not dramatic, not romantic, in the cliché sense, but it was maybe the most intimate thing anyone had ever said to me. I didn't reply with words. I leaned in and kissed him. Slow, deliberate. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to mark the moment with something that said I heard him, that I understood. He kissed me back, deeper this time, like he wasn't holding back anymore. And when he pulled away, his voice cracked just a little. "You're the only person who stayed." He said it without weight, but I could hear the grief underneath it. Not just about her, about everyone who had ever left him feeling unseen, half-held, half-heard. "I didn't stay out of pity," I said, gently brushing his hair back from his forehead. "I know. I stayed because I wanted to. I still do." His breath caught slightly. And then he shifted, turning toward me fully, and wrapped his arms around my waist, burying his face into my chest. We sat like that for a long time. His body against mine, his breath slowing, the weight of him gradually melting into my arms. He wasn't crying, he wasn't falling apart, he was just letting himself be held. And I let myself hold him. Fully. No hesitation. Later, when we went to bed, he didn't just crawl in beside me, he climbed in like it was his bed too. He kissed my neck, pressed his forehead to mine, whispered, "Thank you." Like it wasn't just for the night, but for the whole stretch of days that came before it. When he shifted down and rested his head on my chest again, I wrapped both arms around him, pulled the blanket higher, and whispered back, "You don't have to thank me for that." He didn't answer, but he didn't let go. We didn't make love that night. We didn't need to. There was something about the way he curled around me, fingers laced with mine under the blanket, breathing in rhythm with my own, that felt more intimate than anything physical ever could. This was the part no one talks about, the quiet, the softness, the space between survival and peace, where someone finally feels like home after a long, hard year of feeling like a stranger in their own life. It was a few weeks later, on a Sunday morning, when I realized the grief had started to let go of him. Not completely. I think pieces of that kind of loss always stick around in quiet corners. But something had shifted. He laughed more easily, cooked more, played music while he shaved. He started sitting closer to me for no reason. He didn't flinch when I reached for his hand in public. He even bought flowers for the kitchen counter one day, no explanation. Just walked in with a small brown paper-wrapped bundle, dropped them in a glass of water, and said, "I thought the place could use something alive." I knew what he meant. So much of him had come back to life without either of us realizing it. And I'd been lucky enough to be there when it started. The next time she texted, "The ex," he didn't hide it. He handed me his phone while we sat on the balcony, eyes on the skyline. "She asked if we could talk," he said. I looked at the message, just one line. "Can we meet? Just to talk." "Do you want to?" I asked. He took a long sip from his drink, then shook his head. "No. I just wanted you to know. Thanks for telling me." He didn't say anything right away, but then he turned toward me and added, "A few months ago, I would have said yes without even thinking. I'd have driven over, hoping to hear something that would fix it all. And now? Now I don't need to be fixed," he said. "I'm not waiting to be chosen anymore." That landed heavier than he probably meant it to. Not because it was dramatic, but because I knew what he meant. All of us at some point wait for someone else to validate us, to tell us we matter, that we're worth staying for. But he'd stopped waiting and started seeing that he was already enough. The first time we went to bed together, really together, it wasn't planned. It wasn't even a night. It was the middle of a lazy afternoon. Rain pattered against the windows, soft and steady, and we were lying on top of the blankets, tangled up in quiet touches and half-whispered conversations about everything and nothing. It started slow, hands exploring, kisses deepening, but what made it unforgettable wasn't the physical part. It was the way he looked at me halfway through, his fingers gently brushing my jaw, and said, "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe doing this again." I didn't respond right away. I didn't have to. I just leaned in and kissed him again. Slower this time, like we had all the time in the world. Because we did. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not in a bad way. Just in a quietly overwhelmed kind of way. I laid there on my side, watching him breathe, watching the way his chest rose and fell, the corners of his mouth still curved from whatever dream he was having. He looked at peace. And I think that's what struck me most. Not the kiss, not the closeness, not even the way he fell asleep with his hand resting against my bare back. It was the peace. He looked like someone who'd stopped running, stopped breaking himself in half to meet someone else's version of love. He looked like someone who had finally stayed. Weeks turned to months. The routines became ours. Morning coffee, late-night takeout, his hoodie on my chair, my toothbrush beside his. We didn't label anything. We didn't need to. Whatever this was, it was real. And it was enough. Some nights we'd fall asleep with the TV still playing, our legs a tangle, my hand resting on his stomach as he drifted off. Other nights he'd hold me tighter than usual, and I'd know something had reminded him of the past. We didn't always talk about it, but I always stayed. One night, just as we were both drifting off, he whispered into the darkness, "I don't say it enough, but I love this." "This?" I murmured. "This, you, us." I shifted closer, pressing my face into his neck. "I know," I said. "Me too." He pulled me in tighter. We didn't need anything else. He never said thank you again. Not for staying, not for helping him through the worst of it. Not because he wasn't grateful, but because it stopped being about gratitude. It became something else. Something that started with comfort and turned into connection. Something that started with a door slamming shut and ended with both of us standing in the open, choosing to stay.